Thank you for joining us for part two of our eQuip conversation. I'm excited that we didn't scare you away the first half, right? That you came back so we can finish our discussion. And hopefully you're able to grab some snacks. I know I did. Mark said that he ate some carrots. I ate a bag of chips. I feel awful. Now I have to eat some carrots when we get off of today's session.
They were leftover carrots from last night's dinner. So in fairness, I did not like make carrots. I just had them left over. Anyway.
I ate Doritos. But welcome back. I'm excited for us to continue this conversation. And I know that Mark, you have your prayer point, so we're ready.
Yep. Yeah, so I'm just going to just run through a couple, just a slide to remind people of our agenda. So I'm going to share my screen real quickly. We do have a couple new people who are joining us, so I want to make sure that kind of where we're at, and we can you can do an introduction. So we're in part two right now. So we're going to be the next hour or so. We're going to start by watching a video, and then we're going to have another facilitated discussions. But before we jump into that, I'm just going to give a couple people who are new to the group who are not here for part one, which is great. Like, I'm glad you're joining us to jump in for part two. And so I see Troy. I know Troy really wants to just introduce himself and say hi. And then who else was not here? Am I seeing everyone on my screen for the first part? Is it just Troy? Troy, do you want to say hi?
Hello, everybody. How y'all doing? My name is Troy.
Thanks for
so Troy, just tell us your role within the IF Center.
Yeah, I do technical support. I do course builds, handle coupon codes, and now they're having me transition to make sure a lot of documentation is ADA compliant as well.
So, okay, excellent. Thanks. Troy is a supporting member of our team. It's certainly a lot of that stuff. When you go on to the Skook site, the tcomtraining.com site, he's make sure it gets up there the right way. And certainly that is, and this is the right group for this too, Troy, because California pushes a lot of that stuff and for good reason. And I think, sometimes it takes the rest of the country a little bit of time to, catch up to California. But moving a lot of our documents to ADA compliance is going to be critical to really make sure, that everybody within our collaboratives and our partnerships feels like they can successfully engage with the resources and materials we have. So thank you, Troy. Everyone else, was Michelle, were you here for the part one? It's Michelle Price again. This is
the microphone is not working. However, Michelle is a QI out of Orange County, or the County of Orange.
County of Orange. All right. Okay, great. Well, I'm excited you're here too then. Okay. I mean, Miriam, were you on camera last time, or is this new that you were we not seeing you?
I called IT between the first session and this one.
Awesome.
But I was in the first one.
Yeah, I know you're there, just you're not on camera, so it's good to see you. So we can say that. Okay, so let's share my screen. We're going to start with another one of the videos that Ken from the team have worked on. And so let me do this. There we go. Share this, move to this slide. Oops. Now we did our introductions. Here we go. So this should be optimized for sound and video.
Hey, Kenzie, what are you up to?
Oh, nothing. Just found this amazing series on YouTube. I believe it's called eQIP. I'm watching some videos about FFPSA and QIs.
Oh, really? I had no idea there were videos on YouTube about FFPSA. Here, take this coffee.
Thank you. Finally. And yes, I found them on the TCOM channel. They've been really helpful. I now know what QIs and independent assessors are and what a QRTP is. So, I learned that QIs, or some may call them independent assessors, are professionals who meet specific criteria for Family First programs. These individuals are qualified to recommend prevention services and programs aimed at supporting children and families with high-level needs who are also involved in foster care. QIs may include licensed or certified professionals such as licensed social workers, marriage or family therapists, mental health professionals, substance abuse counselors, parenting educators, and other professionals with relevant expertise and qualifications.
Oh, so you definitely learned a lot since we last talked.
Well, I couldn't wait for you forever to bring me coffee, but I really did learn a lot.
Better late than never. But yes, QIs are essential in recommending evidence-based prevention services outlined in Family First programs, such as mental health and substance abuse treatment, parenting skills training, and family therapy. They interact directly with children and families to gather information to assess their underlying needs and strengths to support their recommendations. So you've told me what you've learned about QIs and independent assessors. What have you learned, Kenzie, about QRTPs?
Qualified Residential Treatment Programs, or QRTPs, are residential foster care settings that meet specific standards and qualifications established by Family First programs. QRTPs are intended to serve as a therapeutic alternative to traditional group homes or congregate care settings, with the focus on achieving positive outcomes for children and promoting their successful transitions back to their family or community-based settings whenever possible.
Well done, Kenzie. Did you learn all of that from the TCOM YouTube channel?
Oh no, I signed up for eQIP Basecamp. I can send you the link.
Oh, okay, thanks. But did you know, to be considered a QRTP under Family First,
I know to be considered QRTP under Family First programs, a residential placement must meet stringent criteria, including compliance with licensing and accreditation requirements, implementation of trauma-informed care practices, provisions of individualized treatment plans based on comprehensive assessments, availability of qualified and trained staff members, including mental health professionals, counselors, and support personnel.
Kenzie, I gotta say, I'm impressed. It now seems like you're an expert on QRTPs. Hey, John.
Oh no, I am no expert. I still have many questions, like how do they implement trauma-informed care practices in a QRTP setting? Like, that's impossible.
If we're gonna get into that, I'm gonna need one of those fancy coffees too.
Awesome. So that leads to a really great conversation. And I really do like that video. I hate to hear it though, because that is me trying to not sound like Kendra. Um, so it's just every time I hear the video, I'm like, ugh. Anywho, but it's great information I shared on there, right? Of just really what QIs do, really what independent, RS, or what in the world is going on with me? Um, QRTPs or RTRTPs, what they are to be, right? Or what they have to really available for our youth, right? How can they benefit from getting the treatment services from those different settings? That is what I was trying to say the whole time. So hopefully that is a great resource that you can also use. That's a benefit. And we do get Mr. B a coffee in our next video that's going to come out hopefully before next year, discussing trauma-informed care practices inside of a QRTP setting. So that is the next, just a little plug, the next video that is coming out.
Great. I can't wait to see that one. I like all of these. I think they're really well done. You and Brandon and then the team, Troy and the team that put those together do a great job. Okay. So let's jump in. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, so it is. We're among celebrities, Michelle. We got Kendra and Brandon on here. All right. So a couple questions to guide our discussion really for the next 45 minutes or so. So I'm going to share the screen again just so you can see. So we're going to try to work through these in no specific order, right? But is placement recommendation supported in QI narrative? Are identified strengths and needs thoroughly articulated? And this could be as it's, applies to your role and your experiences. Our child's short, long-term goals thoroughly articulated? Do interventions correlate to identified needs? And can you identify the youth family input? Is the youth and family input substantive? And the two questions in green, I know we did touch on those this morning. And so we can, start with the other ones or revisit some of that conversation. Really, it's up to you guys. So as we look at those, and I'll put those in the chat as well, but are there any that stand out to you or parts of your experiences as a qualified individual or independent assessor that, share with the group and kind of talk through?
Okay, so now now that I'm familiar with QI and what we're talking about, I've had some baby, tiny, itty bitty baby experience with it. When we've needed to place some, special need kids that were like either probably like in temporary shelter cares and need to be moved to a higher level of care, and they have all the particulars that are going on. So that first question about does the QI narrative support placement or get them a supportive placement? I think most of the time it kind of works, but what my experience has been usually with new detentions is that they can either be really stable or really unstable, so that changes. And that with youngsters who've been around for a while, their needs and placement seems to be consistent from what I've observed or had some little baby experience in. And I know the cans should be playing a big part in that. I can't recall how. I can ask over here, one of my buddies though. Pam, you ever use the cans when you did the QI assessment? When you did the QI assessment, when you did a QI assessment to place a kid in a special place, you know, the QI. Did you do a QI?
No.
Oh, never
I
mind.
have to do one.
I got to find out who did a QI. I know somebody over here has.
So
I'll find out. I'll find out, y'all. This is national. This is just a national training. Don't worry about it, friends. Don't worry about it. I know I've seen somebody do them though, and I just don't know how if the cans is really utilized. Maybe somebody else from LA County or the County of Orange can tell us.
As everyone from the County of Orange are like, yeah, that is my job.
Yeah, so it would be good to Erica's point. Erica, thank you for kicking it off and sharing that. I think it would be good to someone to talk through, because I think in having conversations with investors, implementation folks, that is a piece where I feel like the real connection between the placement and recommendations, the goal of it, and those identified needs and strengths and resources is critical. And so how you navigate that, how you're, the challenges of maybe documenting that clearly or how that shows up. Curious for people to talk through their experiences as it relates to that.
I think the biggest challenge over here in Orange County is I think we do great in all of these, as far as all of these questions. We're able to get great family input. It is substantive, except if the family, sometimes the parents are no longer involved, so we won't always involve them, but always great kid interviews, great interviews with the social workers. Well, sometimes it's a new case for the social workers, so they don't even know, but so that's hit or miss. Interventions do correlate with identified needs. Okay, so that's where the challenge comes in, I think, in Orange County. I feel like there's nobody keeping social services accountable to what our recommendations are, or probation. So sometimes we might give specific recommendations as to services that would benefit the youth. And we're over here, unicorns and rainbows. It's easy to recommend something. As far as implementing it, that's another challenge, you know? But I guess we don't really know if things are being implemented. We send off the case on its merry way and we don't really hear anything after that. So, but I haven't heard too many musings about whether our recommendations are kind of implemented into the case plan. I haven't heard much about court keeping social services or probation accountable for ensuring that our recommendations are implemented. So I think that's a challenge that we have here. I feel like the QI report they just submit it to court and that's it. They don't really use it to guide their services. Maybe some do more than others, but I feel like that's been a little bit of a gap.
Thank you, Marcy, for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I think, I think there was, in sitting at some national conversations, some acknowledgement that this could be a gap because of when you kick off the process with a person who's independent, what you're really saying is that, well, this person it's not in their role to follow up and keep tabs on this stuff. And so there's built in that potential for this. I'm curious though, Marcy and others, from your experience, whether that annual review, so every year, right, to again eliminate long stayers, right, they're supposed to come back up for a review to do this process over again, right? Whether that gets handed back to the original independent assessor or QI, or does that just kind of get put back in the hopper, and is that someone else may pick that up for the reassessment a year in? And it should be 6 months for, can't remember the age cutoff, Kendra, you might remember, and maybe it's 12 and under or 14 and under is 6 months, but over is a year review, as determined by the legislation.
Is that a current process? It's supposed to be reviewed yearly.
So as according to the legislation, now I have not read your QRTP plan in detail, but that was something that would have been outlined there. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's either the social workers or maybe over here we call it STRTPs instead of QRTPs. It's either the social workers or the STRTPs that do that follow-up plan, but we're not, they don't collaborate with us on that. So we don't hear anything about that.
So others, thank you for clarifying that. And that's again another place where that makes sense then, that you don't feel like there's that follow through, or you have no, you're not sure what happens. Other people's experience with this?
Yeah, I think I'll add to that it I know, like I said earlier, it is Orange County is doing a learn as they go, and I think one of the recent implementations that we did was to provide the QI assessment to the placement where the child goes for them to know the recommendation, because we had initially had the understanding that the social worker would make sure that whatever assessment we had done would be translated or provided to the information would be provided to the STRTP or the home or the placement where the child was going, but it was not turning out that way. So like Marcy said, it was kind of like a dead end. Like we could recommend, but then the kids were coming back from like placements, and of course they were not having their needs met or getting like the appropriate care plan for their mental health needs, because they had like no guide to go off of. They were kind of just going off the court reports without the direct assessment from like our last assessment.
Thank you, Sylvia, for sharing that.
So it's getting better. There's still a lot of room for progress. As far as I think it is a big collaboration like effort. We're willing to do it, but like I said, because there's a lot of turnaround in social workers in our county, I don't know how soon that's going to happen, where it's going to kind of flow and be like a common sense thing of like, you're doing a QI, collaborate and kind of like know what they're doing and what we're doing to help their kids or the kids, on their caseload.
Yeah.
I feel like I remember hearing during one of the eQuip meetings that another county emphasized how their court or their judges were really holding their social services accountable to the recommendations in the QI. So I was so surprised by that because none of us have ever heard from court or heard anything about judges keeping people accountable. So I think every county is different. And unfortunately, us as QI assessors, we only have so much power to encourage social services, the executives to encourage that the QIs become more of a valuable part of their process. So, but we do try our best to make suggestions, whether those are taken up or not, that's out of our hands. But it's the challenge of being the independent role that sometimes we feel a bit on the outside.
And so do you attend court, that initial court session? No.
We don't.
Yeah.
So again,
I was
that
just,
varies around the country. Yeah.
yeah, I was just looking at the some paperwork from California for QIs just to, see if there were some of those ages and those time frames. And what you're saying is spot on, right? To ensure that you remain an objective party, you're not involved in the youth case. So you only do the assessment, and the only time you're back involved if there's another assessment that's being requested of you. So it's intentionally. Some states do it a little different, but again, the law is up for interpretation, and every state, is going to implement it the different ways.
Other thoughts?
And if you want to read that document, it is located on Basecamp. Am I trying to sell Basecamp?
Another Basecamp plug. Yeah, I'm curious too, and this gets back to maybe one of the things I was thinking about while Marcy you were sharing and Sylvia you were sharing is that that might be a place where additional resources would be helpful, is to talk maybe specifically about the reassessment process, pull out some of the things from people's their Cure TV plans and speak to what that could look like, like a year in. I know that those folks too that have QIs and IAs that have had to show up at court, that introduces its own set of challenges. So there are challenges when you're not engaged with the court and the recommendations within that setting, and then there's a lot of challenges when you are as well. So, yeah. Okay. With
And I
that,
wish Tennessee was on, because Tennessee has some really great information that would be very helpful. So check out Tennessee's tab in the in Basecamp if you are already involved. And it really does give a lot of great tips and tricks and things how they're doing and checklists they've created for themselves to help support their QIs and their youth that's receiving those assessments.
I wonder too, one of the things that you all spoke about, if we could maybe dig in a little bit deeper around, is the articulation of services within the recommendations, and just your experience and the challenges that you're kind of, how familiar do you feel like you have to be with whatever exists in the community-based service array in Orange County or whatever county you're in? Are there ways or strategies you have for keeping up to date on what services might be appropriate or inappropriate, or how you move through that part of the QI documentation or placement recommendation documentation?
I'll go ahead and go.
Thanks.
I think it all comes down to exposure of what's out there. I'm super advantaged because I worked in Orange County Social Services as a social worker for 8 years before I came to QI. So I was really familiar with almost all the services that are available. But once I came here, I started to find out that there are other services available, like equestrian therapy. We have that in the community. So I think it all comes down to collaborating with everyone on the team to see what's out there. That's why participating in the CFTs are so important. And in California, we have interagency placement committee meetings that happen for every case that we're considering STRTP. So that is a meeting where basically everyone that's involved with the family, aside from the family, shows up to this meeting to just talk about the case and what the kids need and what resources are available. So everyone from wraparound to social services administrators and then for the probation side too, it's probation and who else? The therapist shows up. So having all those community members or service providers showing up to those meetings is really helpful because they will kind of detail what services are out there and that they think would be applicable for the youths.
Do they review the QI report during the CFTMs?
No. So the CFT in our county, they usually occur before the QI report is completed. And often, unfortunately, we have an administrative block when it comes to that because social services wants their CFTs to occur before they even submit the QI referral. But for us to open a case with like billing and all that, we need to have the referral, we need to have the informed consent. So oftentimes they haven't submitted the referral yet, but they're holding a CFT and we can't attend because of the informed consent has not been completed yet. So yeah, that's been a barrier over here.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you find that for those youth, are they already placed at STRTPs and need a QI assessment? They're having the CFTMs that would be beneficial for you to be able to attend, but you couldn't because of those barriers?
Sometimes I'm not totally understand if I understand what you're saying. Sometimes they're with family and they were just recently removed, or sometimes they're already in an STRTP and they need to move to a new one. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, just saying, are they are they going to need a QI assessment? However, because that information wasn't signed, you're not able to attend to gather a lot of that great information that would have been shared during that CFTM. I see Miriam shaking her head.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly the case.
And Miriam, you can speak to it as well. I saw your head nod.
Yeah, so if we can't attend the CFT because they didn't submit the referral or we don't have like the required documents, we do ask for the notes. So we do get some information, but it is different, when you are there versus when you're not. But we can have access to the notes if we didn't attend. And we do input that into our report too. In regards to what the recommendation was as well, like did everyone agree that STRTP was the best placement?
Awesome. And I think that's what you were talking about, Marcy. So that's awesome. Mark.
So I do want to, go ahead.
That too. I'm sorry. We get updates and resources from the county and also collaborating with other service members.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight, Michelle, your comment there. I think that's key. It sounds like in your county, you guys have a good handle on how to make sure that happens. Certainly that's, speaking nationally, that's not a given that people feel real confident that they can recommend actual specific levels of services that they know exist versus saying kind of we have generic recommendations around what the congregate care facility, the STRP or the QRTP should do. So great. Thank you guys for weighing in on that one. And again, another one where I think making sure this follow-up, this comes down to it too, right? Did they follow the service recommendations? Did kids functioning issues improve is the other piece of follow-up that becomes important. So that follow-up cans. And I think, around the country, we're probably getting into a place where reassessments will be able to tell us a little bit of, are there improvements or are there not? I wonder anecdotally, though, from your perspective, is that part of your implementations? Do you guys have strategies on how you might think about whether this initiative is working or not? Meaning like globally, thinking like, is this working? What things do you guys look at to say, yeah, how do we know if these efforts we're putting in are actually shifting and making a change? And I'll just give you one data point that when we were in the in-person conference last week, LA County shared some of their data, and Brandon or Kendra, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they said they had 256 congregate care placements in the county, which seemed unbelievably low. I'm wondering if this is a thing you guys track, how you're trying to measure success within your implementation.
We don't track it over here because we don't have the numbers as the QI assessors, because that's social services realm. But I did speak to a manager about a year ago, and he said that the STRTP numbers have significantly decreased since FFPSA came out.
That's good.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that feedback, Marcy, right, would be helpful to kind of guide the work you're doing too, right? So if it really is having the desired impact, and then just to see for those youth who still end up there, are they getting their needs met? What does the length of stay look like? Those kinds of things.
So I just want to chime in a quick comment based on Marcy's comment. I wonder, Marcy, you can sort of give us some insight on whether or not that increase is related to not having access to beds. I know that some other jurisdictions will utilize this resource as a means on the basis of not having anywhere else for that young person to go. Can you speak to that if that's valid at all?
That I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. But I think a big part of it is just you know how the pendulum swings with the weather of like how conservative we are about removing kids or how well we do to engage family. But I think there's just such an emphasis now on making sure kids are with family members. And that's just a general trend within child welfare. So I think with that trend, just there's more efforts being made to, and we also, with the knowledge that we know of how it's not good for kids to be in congregate care, that the outcomes aren't as good. So we all know that now. So with that knowledge, I think everyone does everything in their power to prevent these placements whenever possible. But I think at the same time, it's good that we still do have access to these types of placements because some kids do need them still.
Mm-hmm. I know when we first heard about it in South Carolina, all the residential treatment facilities thought that they were all going to shut down. They're like, oh, we're all going to close. They're never going to, like, group homes are no longer a thing. And then we realized, wait, no, they're not going anywhere. We just need to provide a specialized supports for our youth that are in these settings, and to help them to get back into family care or return home safely and as quickly as possible. But yeah, we saw that it was like a thing where they were like, all of them are shutting down, but then where are the kids going to go, right? And that wasn't what happened. But we also see better treatment now in those facilities.
Yeah, I've heard some great success stories over my 2 years here. Especially, unfortunately, we do have to place the little kids sometimes in congregate care facilities, but I feel like in those circumstances, those are the kids that benefit the most. We've have had this discussion of, well, do you recommend they don't go to an STRTP and instead they continue to fail placements over and over and over again? Like, what's going to be more detrimental to them? So we've become a lot more open-minded of saying, hey, let's put them in an STRTP, let them get these intensive services so they can really make that change, especially with their younger brains. It's easier to mold them. So we've seen that trend too, that, if we hate to place little kids in these facilities, but sometimes it's good to kind of nip their behaviors in the bud and get them the intensive services that they need to help turn things around.
Right. The right placement the first time. One of my pet peeves, and if you've ever heard me talk in any sense of time, you would know, is failing up. Like, I dislike that. Why do I have to mess up to get the correct placement? Why not put me in the correct placement the first time instead of me having to continually have to mess up to get to the placement where I need it to be? If you truly assessed me the very first time and you would have known I had these needs that could have been met this level of care, instead of me being traumatized by being moved repeatedly, right? That wasn't really needed, instead of putting me in the correct placement the very first time. So Marcy, that
Yeah, I think I'll add to like what Marcy's saying. There has, because Orange County is very focused on trying to place with family settings. Um, there's the reality of the assessment where we are recommending a certain type of placement because of the mental health needs, and when we see that get disregarded by court because their priority is to send them to a family member, we had like I did an assessment for a 16-year-old that was in juvenile hall, and they released her to a grandma who's like 76 just because she said, well, I don't want her to go to a group home, so yeah, I'll take her. But then she was never home. She was like 3 months running away. And it's like, additionally, when we got that reassessment, I talked to the grandma, and in my interview with her, she's like, well, I didn't know she needed all this like mental health support. Like, she just says she's sad and that, she went through stuff when she was a little kid, but, she kind of has to get over it. And, this is the consideration that like the social worker can emphasize to court, where we do our assessment, but if a family is not equipped to support the youth by taking them to get the mental health needs they need, then it's kind of like they keep coming back for the, some of these assessments are like at the seventh reassessment. And, nobody wants to put a child in a group home or congregate care, but, kind of like the setup is to have to address and stabilize so that they can then be in a home setting. And I don't think that the social workers can see it that way, because court does want to like place in a home setting before I don't know if it's for funding or for just the purpose of, we like to not have kids be in out of home care. So that's where our assessments feel kind of like hopeless, where we're like, okay, why are they still trying to place not what we're recommending? Like, when you need intensive therapy or trauma focused therapy, even our clinics don't do a lot of trauma focus because they're just so impacted. And, when we're recommending to get therapy once or twice a week, and then they send them to like an outside resource for therapy services, they're getting seen once every 2 weeks. So of course they're not going to have enough to be able to stabilize, even if they're in a home setting.
Yeah, Sylvia, that too would be something that, thank you for sharing that. But hopefully we could start to track some of those things to see is when the recommendations of the QI are not followed, or the courts or the team decides to go in a different direction. How does that impact that youth? Does they increase the placement disruptions increase? Does the length of time in care increase? So that's do placement disrupt? Yeah, are we seeing youth bouncing around more? So numbers of placements increasing. So that's would be something to hopefully use as an advocacy tool. Other comments? I know, Michelle, you're not able to jump on the microphone, but thoughts or comments from anyone else who's here?
Piggybacking a little bit on Sylvia, I think there is a section in the report that says like potential, I can't remember, I just came back from a long maternity leave. It's either potential or what are the caregivers? Miriam?
Like potential family members for placement?
Yeah, there's that section that says potential or. Anyways, my point is that there's a section to put like potential caregivers. So I get a lot of caregivers that are like, oh, I've had the kid in my house in the past and I would love to take him back, but I can't with these current behaviors. So it's good that our QI reports are able to keep track of the past caregivers or future potential caregivers, so that we can come back. We don't forget about them, you know, because sadly some of these kids are in the system for a while, and we want to continue to assess for family caregivers so that we can explore those options when these behaviors are mitigated a little bit with services.
And McKenna wrote in the chat, identified. So
Yes, yeah, it's either potential or identified caregiver, which we're still sometimes trying to figure out what the difference between those two are. Yes, it's either a potential caregiver or identified. And I think potential means more like, oh, there's like more of a potential that the kid could go there, and identified as, oh, there's somebody out there, but they're not close enough to wanting care for this kiddo.
maybe kind of swinging it from identified to potential, right?
I'm curious too with the change in how in the next couple of years how they fund placements within the state of California, how that impacts all of your, for those who are California QIs on here, that your role in being able to advocate, right? So it's these interventions or supports or services will be attached to the intensity of needs. And so it may open up other avenues where families feel like, yeah, I can't, you know, have the child in my house if these are the behaviors. But if the conversation is, well, these are the behaviors, but you get this level of funding to address these behaviors, that maybe the conversation can shift towards, there's probably a way for us to provide supports for real intensity. So it's all, you know, it remains an open question. I do think though that the folks in Sacramento envision a system in which the funding follows that youth, and that there's nothing that the youth doesn't have access to within a family setting that they potentially would within a congregate care setting. So, you know, a lot remains to be seen.
Yeah, because sometimes it's a full-time job to get these kids the services they need. So
That's exactly how the state, when in the in-person session we had in San Francisco last week described it. They said our expectation is that if you're caring for a youth with high needs or service intensity needs, that caregivers probably can't work the way they were working, or can't, you know, so that we need to fund them in a way that allows them to really provide that care and not pretend that they can just manage it all on their own. So I am hopeful. I mean, I think that this is moving in a good direction. Other comments or thoughts? Concerns? So it might be one last phrasing of a question before we wrap our time together. So let's change our roles here. Let's pretend. Oh, great. Yeah, Marcia, thank you. That you're in Kendra's role or my role or Brandon's role, and you say, we're gonna try to set aside some time to develop some resources. Where would you start? What were the ones that you'd say, you know what, this would be the most helpful thing to try to design for qualified individuals or independent assessors? Where might you start?
well, the training I first received was a very kind of vague training from UC Davis. I still didn't know what my job was or what a QI was after that training. It took me a while to wrap my head around it. So I wish there were better resources for that. At the end of the day, the most helpful resource for me was we have these things called all county letters that come from the state down to each individual county. So that was the most helpful resource for me, because the verbiage was very specific about what our role is, why we're doing what we're doing. So that would have been helpful. Just a more training that was more specific about what our role is and why. Also, if there was more, I don't, the report that we write, is that from the federal, or is that from California? So that you guys don't have much input on that one, but yeah, I wish there was more kind of input as to what they're looking for in each section of the report. And then I don't know if this is totally related, but I've been a little disappointed that not a lot of people show up to the eQuip meetings. So I don't know if the word's not getting out, or why there's such scant participation, but that would be nice too.
And I think it really is, people really don't know. So it's up to you guys to spread the word. Like, this is here. This is a resource. Please get it out. I do know whenever leadership sends a reminder, we have higher level of participation versus if a reminder doesn't come out. And, we understand you have a lot going on. So we just need to make sure more people know. We'll try our best to get the word out. Maybe have a commercial. I'm joking. We'll never have a commercial. But just making sure that word gets out.
I think, to your point though, Kendra, I think we could add to the start of some of those or the end of some of those other videos that get posted on the channel just to remind people. So we used to try to do that more frequently. So something to maybe revisit. I really like your idea. I've read through that ACL among many ACLs from the state of California puts out, and designing a training or a guide around that. I mean, those are dry reads, right? Like, they're really detailed. They're rather lengthy and sometimes. So maybe creating something that feels a little bit more interactive around that could be a really good idea. I also think that the documentation, like clear directions on that. I know Brandon has a lot of experience supporting New York, as does Kendra, around, they have this, I don't know if you kind of shared, I know it's probably on Basecamp somewhere, but this very like above standards or meet standards or below standards examples that go along with their documentation, the QI. So they'll give an example of, here's what, a shorter long-term plan. When someone wrote it up like this is probably above expectations, above standards. This is one that just meets it, and this is one that's below. So people have a sense of like, oh, this is the way I'm supposed to write these. So maybe for California, we could, in our work more broadly, we can advocate for more direction around that. Was that kind of what you were getting at, Marcy, and that you're saying about how these forms are supposed to be filled out? Is that?
Yeah, some of the sections are a little vague on as to exactly what they're looking for, and also it's very repetitive. It's
Right.
so repetitive. It could really be a lot more concise.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll add to that the format of our assessment seems repetitive, and then it almost feels like there's parts where you question, like, why is this in a different section? Am I supposed to be getting like different information than what I already said or explained? I know one of the parts is when we're implementing the CANS results and we're identifying it, it says like only identify this section, the needs and risks. And there was a conversation within our team. Marcy was not there because she was out, but it's like, why are we putting all the results? Because we were putting all the results of like that were graded 2 and 3, and then it was like it only says to do this, and kind of the decision was left to us to decide what we would put. And I feel like that's something that could have been followed up with like you guys to see, like, because we want to make sure we're putting the right information. But when we were doing all the 2s and 3s, it just was like a lot of information. And I can see it's like the STRTP getting it. It's like, okay, this kid needs all these things, like, but we don't have the time or the resources to do it. What is the most important? And there's a reason why it would be just the needs and the risk, right? Because that's like the most high need right now. You know, they can have other stuff going on and like the history, but what are we seeing now that that's why they need to be placed with you? So I think for our county, there's like not a guide of where we're following through for things, and I felt that that was not something that it should have been left to us to decide what made sense instead of should have been followed up. But I also don't know who the contact would have been for that. So that's kind of like maybe identifying or providing us like who would we contact in a situation where we have a question on an assessment follow through.
Yeah. That's
So Sylvia and Marcy, if you can, actually everyone that's here, if you can put your first name, last name, email address into the chat box. I do have a QI documentation rubric that is used in others in another state in particular. It can serve as sort of a basis or a guideline for understanding what needs to be where within your narrative documentation. So if you'd like to see that, I can't place it into the chat box based on our formatting for conference, but I can certainly email it to you to just be something to look at to give you some sort of a focal point.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful because from when I came in, I know whoever trained me that was leaving said, "Oh no, the format so and so made it," and it sounded like they were just like a clerical person. I'm like, okay, but this box is repetitive this year, and they're like, "We can't touch it," and then it just has stayed. So that's also where I was like, oh, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, so I guess I won't question it. But as I've gone through and done more of the assessment and seen the impact of like how they do or don't um, get considered for placements, I would want to do a better job at identifying the correct information to get the children the right placement and support.
And I am going to throw out there, come to the collaboratives, because we do have individuals that did support the work around development of the actual documentation, um, shows up to the meeting. So William, I think call him Bill Moore from California, he's there. He's really interested in hearing how to make things better for your state. And so join, that's great information and feedback for you to be able to ask him so that he can support it, maybe even go in and suggest some changes and some updates to support the work that's being done. So I don't mean to just throw his name out there. He's not here today, but I know that he is a eQIP champion, and he is really passionate about making sure that California has what they need to support the children and youth and families.
Is he at UC Davis or is he at the state?
The state.
The state, okay.
I went and looked his name up just so I can make sure I had it right.
Yeah, you don't want to be. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, we're just about at time. I know that we want to thank you for spending this last hour and the hour before with us. And this has been helpful just even to listen to your stories and for us to brainstorm. Hopefully it's been helpful for you as well. Other closing comments, Kendra or Brandon?
Thank you for being on. Thanks for the conversation. I believe that with this conversation, we're able to go back as a team, like Mark said, and create some really good content for you guys to support you. And not just in California, but around the country, because everyone's doing this work. What can we do to help support them? And as always, California is a leader of us creating great content to support others who are not where you are, because y'all typically lead the pack, right, of things that are needed. So just thank you for being on. Thanks for our LA for being here, listening to this discussion, adding to the discussion. Thank you, the County of Orange, for just really being on, and thank you for the work that you guys do on behalf of others. I know, and sometimes a very thankless job, you don't get thanked enough. So thank you for what you do for our children and families.